Hello, everyone. I have a housekeeping note for Q&A here that I'm supposed to read ahead of time. A quick note about Q&A before we get started. This year, everyone here in Austin can participate in the Q&A by using the JNUC app. Take a moment to open your app and simply choose Session Q&A. In the app, locate this session from the list and start submitting and upvoting questions. Our virtual attendees will join as well, asking questions directly from the session page. Your submitted questions will fuel the Q&A segment in this session, which Rick will help us with later. I'm going to put this down in my pocket, I think. So we're here to talk about how Stanley Black and Decker built a shared iPad model. I'm Tim Knox. I'm from Jamf. My job is a senior consulting engineer at Jamf that is focused on all of our industry solutions. That is to say, manufacturing, retail, healthcare, airlines, and I started with manufacturing because that's what we're here to talk about today. And Frank, who are you?
My name is Frank Pfeiffer. I am a project manager at Stanley Black and Decker, and one of the efforts that I lead is our devices and operations effort.
Hey everyone, my name is Audrey Van de Castle. I am the Director of Digital Transformation for Stanley Black and Decker. Frank's on my team. My team deploys mostly software into our manufacturing and distribution facilities around the globe, and then also a little bit of devices, which is what you're going to hear about today.
Yes. So mostly what we're hoping to accomplish today is to find out how this project came to be, how mobility got implemented at Stanley Black and Decker, and how the two different teams, or all of the teams, because there's a whole mess of folks who got involved in how to make this possible, how all of that, the interactions, collaborations worked, and all the bits and pieces that it took of how to get all this stuff off the ground. So, cross-functional teams, how do you make that work?
It's a good question, especially in a giant matrixed organization like Stanley Black and Decker. So Stanley Black and Decker has about 50,000 employees around the globe. About 30,000 of them are within our supply chain division, which is where our manufacturing and distribution centers are. Maybe about 25,000 of those folks are hourly employees. We like to call them makers. So if you hear me saying maker during this presentation, that's what I'm referring to. And this project was really born out of, number one, a need that we saw in our facilities, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. And then number two, cross-functional collaboration and support all the way throughout the business, right? You can see this nice list up there of internal stakeholders. So part of this project was born in an HR organization for our makers that was really focused on that hourly employee experience, right? We knew that our hourly employees were having a bad experience when it came to accessing software and using mobile devices on the shop floor. Our IT and our OT teams were heavily involved. Sometimes kept at an arm's length, as sometimes we keep IT. Our operations teams in our facilities who had this pain point and didn't have the bandwidth or the technical know-how for solving it. Our advanced manufacturing team, which is really focused on how we can bring digitization and digital solutions into our facilities. A lot of our facilities are maybe a little bit lower on the digitization curve, right? Bad network connectivity, using paper and pencil instead of digital tools, that type of thing. And then even all the way to procurement, which is a big part of the pain points that our sites were feeling. They didn't know how to get the right product and make it work. And then also Cribmaster, which is one of the brands that Stanley Black and Decker owns that you might not know about. We have a whole slew of brands. Cribmaster is actually sort of like an industrial inventory vending brand. So they do a lot of work around deploying consumables on the shop floors around the globe. And they had a product that actually fit our needs. So it was kind of cool that the call was coming from inside the house with a solution.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there was Apple. And I see our friend from Insight back there, so we can talk to him later if there's questions specific around Insight. And Jamf, that's me. I didn't give you the slide. Do you want this thing?
No, you got it.
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
So yeah, two big ideas here. The shop floor data collection and training. You want to talk about those two things?
Sure, yeah.
Cool.
So those are the two main use cases that we see our devices used for, and where the real need and the push was coming from for this project, right? And so we'll get into a little bit more granular detail around those, but essentially it's how do we make sure that our employees making our products are trained in the right way? And then also, how do we make sure that we're able to capture all of this cool data that's being generated on the floor that we could drive insights with, but that we don't because we don't have a digital way to capture it, right? And so that was really the crux of why do we do this project. It's for those two big ticket items right there.
Gotcha. I don't even know where to start with this one.
So let's talk a little bit about the solution itself and why it's here, right? I talked a little bit about training and what we needed. We needed a way, and what the experience was in our plants around using digital tools. We have a whole slew of these employees who don't have digital identities, they don't have single sign-on accounts, they don't have devices provisioned by SBD, but then a team like mine is coming and saying, hey, here's some of these cool tools like DPAL, like Tulip, that you should be using on your plant floors. And we weren't solving for how are you going to access these tools. So just to give a quick overview of the two main tools that we really see being used on these, because I think they're kind of interesting, and you guys are techie folks, right? So the one is DeepHow, which is like a video-based learning platform, right? And so I always liken it to YouTube University. You can imagine your garbage disposal breaks. You go onto YouTube and you watch a video of how to fix it, right? Wouldn't it be nice if you learned at work in that same way, right? And so DeepHow is a platform that allows our plants to capture with video a standard work on the shop floor, right? And what's really cool is that's got an AI in it. So we're exposing our employees to AI, taking away some of that fear of the unknown around AI. But the AI can also transcribe it and translate it for us, which is a really critical thing for a lot of our facilities who have multilingual speakers in them. Another cool platform that we're using is one called Tulip. It's a low-code, no-code app platform. So this is how we're able to create light digital apps to collect data on our shop floor. Instead of writing down your inventory on a piece of paper, just write it on this little app on an iPad. And now we've got an essential storage. We can run analytics on it. We can visualize it for the plant manager and help them make decisions. So those are two of the main use cases that we're seeing with this solution. So what are some more of the problems that we had? When we first stepped into this project, Frank, I'm thinking back, we would see things like dead Android devices mounted on a machine. And we'd ask people about them, and they'd say, oh yeah, it hasn't worked for like 3 years, right? So the state of IT infrastructure and device infrastructure in our facilities was bad. Maybe it existed in some way, shape, or form, but it was pretty clear to us that our IT teams didn't know how to support them. Our operations teams didn't know how to procure them. And the users themselves on the floor didn't know how to work with them, right? And so all of these problems really bundled into us really looking at a more holistic project, taking all of that off the plate of our facility leaders and IT teams, and centralizing all of it. Procurement, device management, distribution, the whole 9 yards. And you'll hear a little bit more about that today, about how we streamline all of that and what it looks like for a plant to get it. Yep. So what is in our solution? So we haven't seen a picture of the DevLock yet, but if you've gone to the floor downstairs, you might have seen a DevLock in person down there in the Insight booth. You can talk to Ingrid down there later this afternoon if you haven't seen it. We've got one here in person. DevLock is essentially a big vending machine that you can put a bunch of stuff inside of, right? What do we put in there? We put in 20 iPads in their cases. We put in 2 iPhones. Those are easier to film with for DeepHow. We kit those iPhones with a stabilizer and a Bluetooth headset. It's really good at noise canceling. It's noisy on a shop floor, right? And we also include mounting hardware or straps, those types of things. So that's kind of what's hardware-wise kitted in the device.
And all of that has power and everything run to it.
Yes, so the locker itself has an Ethernet connection, power connection. So inside of the locker, there's each bay has a USB port and a charging port. So we're actually transmitting data. There's a Mac Mini inside of it that the users obviously don't see, and that's really where all the magic happens.
And how stoked are you that it's going to be USB-C soon?
Very stoked. Makes it easier. We won't have to use the little adapters anymore.
Yeah, love it. So how about the shared devices?
Yes. So we do a shared device model. Again, I said that we don't have necessarily digital identities for our makers, so that was kind of a necessity for us to have a shared device model, right? I just want you to be able to grab an iPad, authenticate in the app that you need to use, and keep it moving, right? And so we've listed out some of our use cases there: training, audits, data collection. That's really what it all boils down to. And then there's a whole bunch of different applications that we use around maintenance, training, skills matrices. You can see some of them listed up there.
It looks incredibly
Jamf.
complicated. Yeah, and so all of
And
those
Jamf.
different use cases have different things that they need on it and different requirements.
Right. And where it really gets crazy is each plant, none of our plants look the same, right? We've got about 150 locations around the world. They all make a different product. We have 200,000 different SKUs within Stanley Black and Decker, right? Crazy. And so each plant uses a different software, wants a different this or a different link for this, right? So we have to be able to control and configure them centrally, and we need an easy way to do that. The first MDM that we used, which I won't mention, was terrible at that, and we pivoted to Jamf maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago,
3 years ago?
3 years ago. Time flies.
2? Use your mic.
12 months.
12
Your mic.
months.
12 months.
Really?
Boy, it feels like I've known you forever.
Feels like way longer.
Yeah.
We've been thinking about it for longer than 12 months.
We
We'll put
have
it
been
that
thinking
way.
about it for a long time. Yeah, so that has a lot of complexity. Frank has to deal with a lot of that work because how do you get 150 different locations, all those devices that have all those different workflows, all of those different identities on them, all those different roles, all those different apps? How do we get clever about trying to figure out where all that stuff physically is? And you do something.
So one thing that we've really done to start trying to take advantage of declarative device management is that kind of independence where the device checks in to Jamf instead of the call coming from Jamf is
The call comes inside the building.
the call comes from inside the building.
From the device.
So as far as, again, we have 140 plus locations around the globe. The maintenance software and the safety audits that happen in one building might not happen in the other building. Right at the beginning, we were just assigning all these, having someone go in, do the business case, find out what they're using, and then saying device A goes to Dallas, device B goes to Ottawa, Tennessee.
Just straight up buildings,
Just
assigning it. Right.
just build a building, taking it and assigning it to that location, putting it in that smart group, and letting the configuration profile do the work. What we're trying to catch that declarative device management. So when that device shows up on the site, and either A goes into the locker because the locker sets it up for us, it goes through the setup process, or B, it comes from Insight already configured. As soon as it picks up the IP address range, it will assign it to that smart group and allow it to show the apps that are needed at that site and in that specific profile.
Right on. So yeah, basically using IP whatever IP address range it falls into that's most appropriate for that building, it drops into those smart groups and does that scoping automatically, which is a nice hands-free way of having to deal with that without having to physically touch every device.
And that's
which we want.
such a huge benefit, and taking that load off of our plants has been really impactful, right? The fact that we can ship them an iPad that's already in its case, thanks Insight, already in its case, already knows the network credentials, already connects automatically. Like, those things were some of the biggest hurdles that we saw to adoption with some of the digital tools. I don't know how to set up the iPad. Am I gonna make an iCloud account, right? Oh, I've gotta put 16 screws in this case to put it together because it's a rugged case, right? So being able to automatically, for them, make it work right out of the box, been really awesome.
Yeah.
2 years ago when I got on this project, I was continuously finding iPads set on the factory floor for 3 to 6 months, not set up, because we were asking people to set them up that wasn't their purview from that perspective. So this was a big swing to try to figure out what the switches were to assign the correct applications to them and make sure they had the tools that they need to do their job right out of the box for us. So.
I've said it a million times in every session I've ever done. Let the robots do it. You know, let just anytime you can take it off the hands of the human beings and let the automation do it, it's going to be better.
Because humans are great at some things, but automation, it gives us the same result every time, and this is what we need here.
Yeah, they'd call it humanation if they were good at it. It'd be a totally different thing. Right, so Devlock. So what was your involvement with Devlock? How does it look for you? Do you want to talk about how this works? Either of you.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the DevLock.
Great.
So the DevLock was a product that existed within the Cribmaster portfolio before we came along, obviously, right? But we made it a little bit smarter, a little bit snazzier. Now you can get what's called the DevLock Plus, which is what we use. So what we did is we basically put a Cambrionix switch in the back, and we replaced some of the cabling in it so that we can actually transmit data through the cabling, right? And that's what's in the DevLock Plus. The Cribmaster unit itself also has an RFID badge reader, or you can enter with a PIN number, and you can demo that downstairs if you guys want to take a look at it. And each of the bays are addressable, right? And like I spoke about, it's got power in it, so we're able to charge our headsets and our phones in the same bay, control who can have access to it. There's lots of reporting in there, right, and configuration that we're able to do. So if we wanted to say, Tim is the only person that can access this iPad in this bay, we could do that if we wanted to, right? If we want to make sure the plant manager or the safety manager always has an iPad, we're able to do that with this device.
And we also do something really fun here with Jamf attributes. So when someone returns an iPad to a bin, Apple Workflows runs, and it sends the serial number of the Cambrionix hub. Cambrionix also has a booth downstairs, and the port that is plugged into to Jamf as an attribute. We then use that information to either wipe the device from Jamf and have the locker set it back up for us, or we can use that information to put the device into lost mode. If they can't find it on the shop floor, they can put the device in the lost mode from the locker by returning it lost.
Yeah.
From that perspective. So that's a really, I would say, fun for me and
is fun.
useful, has a lot of utility in the real world on a factory floor at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, being able to know where your device is something that pretty much everybody has said to me at some point in my time talking to customers is, I don't know where my device is.
It's the number one fear I hear from a plant manager when I'm like, hey, we're going to give you this product. They're like, but someone's going to steal the iPad. I wish they would, right? I'm going to put it in lost mode, right? So I think that really alleviates the fear that some of the plant managers have around using digital tools. It's always the number one concern. It's going to get stolen. It's going to get lost.
Right.
Well, now we can find it, kind of.
And everyone here is in the IT business. If we can wipe a device, this alleviates most of our problems that come up. If it's not a configuration issue, it's not a hardware issue. Our rough estimate is like 80% of our service calls are taken care of by being able to automatically wipe the device and get it ready for use for the next person.
And again, that it can be triggered by the end user through the locker interface, right? So one of the benefits of us enhancing this product that we own and sell is that we were able to kind of usher the product team along to get this Jamf integration built into this system, right? So some
My
pretty cool
hope is
stuff.
that because Return to Service basically just came out, yesterday, with the release of iOS 17, and we do have an API endpoint that supports Return to Service, it is definitely possible that we should be able to build that right into this solution and send the Wi-Fi profile in along with everything else without having to go through any sort of human process at all, which would be pretty killer.
Yep.
So yeah, onwards and forwards. We're making some steps in the right direction. And then roles. Jamf setup, I've talked about it a ton in my time at Jamf. I'm excited to see that it's still being used in new and creative ways. You want to talk a little bit about how you're using Jamf setup?
So again, we have different roles in our facilities. We have operations, we have maintenance, we have safety, we have any role, any business use case that a plant manager or EHS manager or an engineer gives me, like we can put that switch on an iPad with Jamf setup and give that user an experience specific to them.
Sure, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, and that's just the app configuration, the app config that we have in our dev instance, and it allows us to configure that role for that specific user, and it follows that configuration profile.
For those of you who have not used Jamf Setup in the past, it is configurable with XML. There's a little blob at the top that you can't change, but everything else you should be able to customize. The name of the roles, the order in which the roles are, the little side color on the side. If you ever go down to the expo booth downstairs, you'll probably find me or Rick over there down there. The manufacturing one that we have has a little hard hat on the left-hand side, as opposed to the green Jamf Setup app. There's lots of things you can do as far as branding goes and customizing it. What else are we talking about here? We got Jamf Reset. So what's that all about?
So Jamf Reset, after the end user or maker on the shop floor is done with that iPad, they can go in and hit reset and prepare that device for the next person to use it.
Yeah, and it is also as simple as that. Should look pretty similar. It's the only major difference here is that you can, it just does erase all content and settings. It's a pretty straightforward. Big red button, nukes the device from the device.
And for me, it's just another way to provide, that's what our Jamf setup looks like. It's another way for me to predetermine what apps need to be on the device before we even ship the device so that the user can access them. And we don't have to spend time setting up that profile after the device is there. So
right. All the apps are already there.
Yeah.
They're just hidden or revealed based on the role that you're actually selecting. And as you can see, they are restricting all of the apps on the device itself, other than settings, which you can't remove, and setup, which would be silly to restrict that one.
Made it pretty easy to tell what you're supposed to do on this screen, right?
Yeah. And they're completely locked down. We want them to use them for business.
Push green button, make go. Yep. Oh yeah, we're gonna walk through it. Look at that.
That's an example of what selecting the operations role would look like. You select operations and you click, is that start? Yeah,
Select
start.
something like that. Yep. And then there you go.
Voila.
Voila. And this is an example of one of our facilities, the specific applications that they need, and only the specific applications they need on the iPad.
And again, that was one of our big friction points with some of the other tablet deployments that we'd seen is like, why do I have the stock apps on here, right? We needed to find a way to get rid of all the extra noise, give them just what they needed to do their job, hide the browser. They can still access the browser if they need to, but we hide it, right? So really streamlining that experience was an important part for us and one of the reasons that we really love leveraging Jamf for it.
And all that is downstairs at the expo booth. Feel free, you can get your hands on it and poke around. It all works on convention Wi-Fi, so you can keep hitting those buttons. Yeah, so the idea is to be productive, flexible, and repeatable. That's what we're always looking for. How can we be the most productive in our jobs? How can we repeat that so that we don't have to keep doing new and doing different things every time, reinventing the wheel every shift? And there you go. That's pretty much it. I am certain there are technical questions up there. That was fairly high level, but we've got the right nerds up here to talk as deep as we want to get. Rick, you're going to bring some questions to me, and then I'll ask them from the screen. How's that sound? Great. I love that. I'm going to just walk right in front of you guys. Thank you, lovely assistant. We got 8 questions. Should we start with the most upvoted or do that one last? Now let's start with the most one. Does Cribmaster have any plans on a form factor designed for phones? And do we have anybody from Cribmaster here or around that might be able to?
Form factor design for phones as in like a smaller window?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of, but we do have someone from Cribmaster here, Ingrid. So if you have further product questions, channel them through Ingrid because she's within the Cribmaster org, and she'll be downstairs as well and can demo the unit.
There you go.
So for us, we like the big bays. We can put all different kinds of stuff in there. In manufacturing, we use stuff like handheld scanners, right? So to have that much real estate is nice for us, but I could see how in other industries, other use cases, you might want a smaller profile.
Yeah, to be able to maximize the amount of space you're taking up, minimize the amount of space you're taking up, and maximize the amount of devices that you can fit within that space.
Yeah.
I can see some
They do
definite
have
utility there.
2 different sizes. So there's a 10 bay, that's what's downstairs, and then there's a 22 bay, and that's really what we're using in our facilities is the larger one. And then you can also have auxiliary units in the same facility that run off of a central unit. So
Killer.
you can go bigger, but not smaller.
Gotcha. Where else do you see digital transformation happening in manufacturing? I'll ask you two. I've talked to a lot of different manufacturers, so I have my own answers, but I'd love to know what you've seen or heard.
I think that there's opportunity and low-hanging fruit for digitization in manufacturing in literally every facet of it, right? I think that if you look at safety, if you look at quality, if you look at production, if you look at even administration, a lot of it, at least in our facilities, and I've been to other manufacturers' facilities and talked with lots of other manufacturers not even in the same industry as Stanley Black and Decker, the manufacturing industry as a whole is like at best in the 1980s, right? At best. So there is wide open space for opportunity and efficiency gains from that, productivity gains from that. Therefore, better news for your bottom line. If you could do things faster, better, more safe, right? There's lots of opportunity there.
We have a lot of, I would say, being that we're organization of mergers and acquisitions, I see digital transformation being able to affect from the actual procurement of materials to the point where our product is in the customer's hand being serviced from that perspective.
Even for returns.
Even when we unfortunately have to get our product back. So like capabilities and being able to connect the pieces and just collect data from the from the whole spectrum of our product's life is.
And that's one of the ways that we'll leverage Tulip, right? And that's one of the things that's really great about having such a flexible deployment with iPads. We don't have to have a device mounted at a specific station, right? We have use cases in our plants with Tulip specifically from the receiving bays through the entire plant to when the product goes out, right? So anywhere on your shop floor and your processes, there is opportunity for digitization.
Cool. We've got a few more questions. We're done at 3 o'clock, right? 4 minutes?
3:15.
3:15? All right, we got tons of time then. I'm going to ask them all. Awesome. So we've got that one. We've got that. Oh, does the DevLock machine also come with a barcode scanner? Have you seen a barcode scanner on the DevLock machine? And what would you use it for?
We just put a barcode scanner in Delhi because it was an acquisition and they don't have our standard SBD badges.
Okay.
I don't know.
So yes.
So yes. I'm gonna say short yes. I didn't want to go into detail there, but
Yeah.
yes, short yes.
Cool.
It's a holdover.
I think they can go, I think that, Ingrid, correct me if I'm wrong, like 90% of RFID badges will also work on it. They can configure it, like all the different badge flavors out there. And then we also have some sites that don't have badges or a barcode, and they'll use a PIN number.
Okay. I see somebody. I will repeat this right into the microphone, I promise, home viewers.
That was my question, because we also have a locker system in place at a customer, and they use it for scanning the barcode with the serial number to get the device back, and
I see.
he knows which device comes back.
So the question specifically, the reason for the question was that the barcode scanner, and I may get this right or wrong, I'm pretty sure I heard all of it from up here, is that that would be used to return the device. The barcode scanner would scan the device itself to get to return the device, which totally makes sense. Absolutely makes sense.
Is that an Ingrid question? Is that?
No,
is that
I think it was just a.
No, she's a Cribmaster. She's from Cribmaster.
Cool.
Okay. That does work. That works with the return of the. We haven't used that in our production, but Ingrid said it does work. It should.
It just works, great, or it should work. Well, great. Okay, did I answer this one? No. What systems do you use for logging into company apps for manufacturing workers outside of Cribmaster? Like, what do you use to log in? Is this username and password? Is it? It has listed here Face ID. I'm certain that's not it.
No. So there's a whole lot of biometric no-nos that we can't really do, especially in certain regions. So we typically use employee ID. Back in April of this year, we deployed single sign-on accounts to all of our makers around the world. Maybe about 30% of those have actually been used and set up. So in theory, they could use a network ID if they knew how to do it. But typically, we see something like a employee ID, some sort of unique identifier to log in. And typically, it's passwordless.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I like passwordless.
Yeah.
Nice. How, or do you, restrict what profiles a maker could select once they have an iPad in hand and are setting up the device? What's to stop them from picking anything?
Yeah,
if
so-
you give them a choice.
Yeah, so
because
we
oftentimes
do-
you don't. I know.
We can assign specific groups of users or specific users to specific bays, right? So that's something that we can configure within the Cribmaster devlock. The other thing is that even if the maker could access the maintenance application, they wouldn't have credentials to log into that application. So cool, you can try and open it. Good luck logging in, right?
And now you're less productive, and that's not great either.
I want to say there's like 2 layers to that because that application would have to be assigned to that site, one, and then that role would have to be, it'd have to be assigned to that role. So that gives it.
That makes sense.
That isn't a direct answer to that question.
No, but I like
yeah,
it.
they could access it.
Yeah.
And given the nature of manufacturing, we're not always doing things where that person has to identify themselves right away. We have applications with these devices where they can enter said data and then scan their badge to send that data across in ToolUp. So it's not always someone logs onto a device and uses it.
Yeah.
It's we are letting the business define value and we are using their use cases.
And even within DeepHal, right? So there's a way that you can generate a public link or a public QR code in DeepHal. So we'll have sites where they'll put a QR code right at the point of need. An employee could take an iPad, scan it with a camera, and watch that video without having to log in because it's a public link, right? Public as in you have to have access to the QR code to scan it, right? And be actually physically in the facility, so it's still secure. And you're not able to kind of close out of it and look at other videos or anything like that. But that is another way that we don't necessarily have to have the user authenticate.
Makes sense. I think this one's specifically for you. Are the devices tied to specific bays?
No. Like, so somebody could return a device to another bay, and the Mac Mini workflow will run, and it will send the new information to Jamf, and it will update the attributes in Jamf. So we would know if someone moves it, or if it got sent to a different site.
Sure.
Does that answer the question?
Totally, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the big thing is if a manager takes all of the iPads out of the bay, hands them out for training, they won't need to figure out this one goes in this bay, this one goes to this.
Right.
They can just throw all the devices
Exactly.
back in the bays, and Jamf will know.
Right, and we could, like, if Frank checked one iPad out, if he came back to return that iPad, that same bay would open, right? It would say, Frank only has one iPad, it came from this bay, I'm opening that again, so you can return to the same bay.
But if someone was to switch the iPad, the workflow that checks to see if the iPad's set up and sets it up also grabs that information and sends it off to Jamf for us.
We have 2.5 more questions. Do you use web clips at all in your environment?
A lot.
A lot. And the follow-up question to that one is, if yes, how do you work around on shared devices? I'm guessing that means shared capital S, shared iPad for business, which I don't think you use.
We do not currently use shared iPads.
Which means that web clips work fine.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Web clips work fine.
Do you implement soft reset in the managed app config for Jamf reset? There's soft reset is clearing the extension attribute inside Jamf reset as opposed to sending an erase all content and settings command in Jamf reset, which removes the value that you selected in setup, putting it back in a null state without actually wiping any of the data. Is that something that you muck around with?
It is not.
Nah,
We use
nuke the
if
device.
we send the wipe, we send the regular wipe.
And the 0.5 question is, hi, Tim, and the comment is, ask the question. So thank you for whoever sent that. I think that's everything. All right. I think that's all the questions I have. I really appreciate everybody's time, and I really appreciate you all coming into town and seeing you again. You know where we'll be. We'll be downstairs in the expo booth and also physically in this room for the next 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, we'd love to chat more if you guys have questions, so
Awesome.
come see the devlock.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
guys.